All right, everybody, welcome to this week's weekly software workshop. We're going to give the attendee list here about a minute to slow down as far as attendees showing up here. So just give us one more minute and we will go ahead and get started. All right, the attendee list has started to slow down here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, to this week's weekly software workshop, where we go over different little parts of the software, but in bite-sized pieces, so that way it's not one big group of information for you. This week, we're going to go over utilizing the calculators that are in the BOSS system. These calculators were put in there a little bit a while ago and have been added over time. They're really there to help you guys make calculations as far as your capacity, what adding to, just one stop per route would, and how that would increase your revenue, things of that nature. A lot of you, if you've been on our other Tuesday webinars, Ken and Jeff will go over different calculations to come up with different things as far as running your business. So these calculators are there to take your numbers and find out the answers that you need to know to run your business. Okay, so with that in mind, that is what we're going to go over today. Just so you know, a general housekeeping thing, this webinar is super informal and laid back. We make it so that you guys can unmute yourself and ask questions. So as we go, if you want to pipe up real quick and unmute yourself and ask a question, please feel free to interrupt me. I will not get offended, I promise. Interrupt me and ask your question because I'd rather you ask it while you have the question and where we need to be in the system for you to get that question answered, okay? The next couple of weeks are going to be full weeks here. We're going to go over using that revenue and expenses feature in the system next week. And then the 16th, you're actually going to have a guest speaker. Ken is going to take over that week and go over managing the timekeeping records for us. And then going over that gross pay calculator. And then at the end of the month, we'll do a big recap of all of that information, okay? So these are great webinars to have like your BCs and such show up to if there's certain parts of the system that they're still trying to get their heads around. That's a couple of the topics we're going to go over for the next month. And just as a general thing, my name is Mason Wells. I'm the manager of customer success here at eTruckBiz, and that is my contact info. If you ever need anything, feel free to reach out to me and we'll make sure that we get your question answered, okay? So with that in mind, we are going to log in to the BOSS system. Make sure I didn't just put my caps lock on because that would be bad. Sometimes I type too fast and get ahead of myself. So the BOSS system is the brains or the brains of the operation, or what would you call it? The switchboard of the eTruckBiz system. Okay, so we do have a bunch of apps. We have the Optics app, the driver app, the P&D driver app, the line haul app for drivers. But the BOSS system itself is the bread and butter. It's where you start out, okay? So for those of you who have been using it, thank you for using it to manage your business, but also for those of you who have not been using it, it is there to do a bunch of your HR things, as well as, manage your revenue and manage your operation as, in real time, and then also with historical data. So it's kind of a one-size-fits-all system. So if you have a question about where things are in here, just let me know, okay? The calculators are under the calculator button. Just so you know, you can open this up and look at the menu as well. I've been in here so many times I probably in my sleep talk about going to many parts of these menu items. So if you go to the calculators, there are 4 in here, okay? And each have their own purposes, but they have a little bit of input that you input yourself for your operation in each one of them. And a lot of times those variables and those things that you would input into these calculators, you can pretty much get from different parts of the system if you don't know what that number is off the top of your head too. So the first one is the power of X. Okay, so the power of X is how many, X equals how many stops you add to each
stops per hour. It's the stops per hour. So the power of 1, how does that affect us? How does adding 2 stops per hour affect us? Oh, let me see if Mason lost her microphone. Yeah. Mason, can you hear us? Getting a weird button. Yeah, that the power of X means what happens in my operation if I add 1 stop per hour to each driver. If driver is able to perform 1 more stop per hour, 2 more stops per hour, how does that affect my operation? So that is what is meant by the power of X. So are you back, Mason? Looks like she's got something weird going on. So as she said, then your inputs, you could put the data in here. What are your average hourly wages? What are the current on-road hours? And if you don't know those numbers, those are normally available, especially the on-road hours, the routes per day. All of that's going to be on the WSW activity in our system. So, Mason, are you back yet?
Yeah, sorry about that. For those of you who have been around, every now and then my phone likes to just hang up. It's not you, it's my phone, I promise. All right, Ken, so were you going over the power of how many stops it would take
stops
to
per
add?
hour. Yeah, the power of X is increasing each driver's stops per hour by 1, by 2, by 3, and then how that affects the operation.
Yep, and the more the better, as everybody knows. And because we sit here and Ken, we sit here on the Tuesday webinars and we hypothesize. Well, if you added this or if you added that, this gives you concrete numbers. This is using your actual route information and your actual pay information to calculate that. So you don't have to hypothesize and theorize and try to figure out what it could be. So what's really great is anytime you see these little eye icons, you can highlight, like hover over them, and they'll tell you this is going to simulate your drivers if they could perform so many stops more per hour. So right now it defaults to 2 stops more an hour. And then it tells you your weekly savings, how much you would save per week if you just increase them 2 stops per hour. And annually, you would save, in this situation with these variables, $72,000 a year, which I'm sure in this economy and in this situation for a lot of you, $72,000 is not some pennies. So that type of savings is, we like to see that. We like to see that amount of savings. And a lot of people will say, when you're thinking about this, hypothetically speaking, and you're sitting here saying, well, adding enough stops where they have, 2 extra stops an hour. When you think of it in terms of it's an hour, there's only 2 extra stops. It really, Ken, you can probably, say better, but that doesn't really increase their day that much. And it depends on, if they're rural and their mileage and stuff like that, but 2 extra stops an hour. If they're out on the road for 7 hours, it's 14 extra stops.
Yes, that's exactly it. And most drivers would tell you, yes, they could get that done in the same amount of time. And especially if you're paying hourly, and you're getting $4 a stop, two more stops means that driver's producing $8 more worth of revenue per hour. And then of course, 8 times 7, if he's on the road 7 hours, that driver is going to produce $56 more of revenue on that dispatch. And what the goal is to hopefully each driver picks up 2 stops per hour, and it allows you to cut out a route. If you've got 10 routes and you go down to 9, you've improved by 10% in your operation. So, thanks, Mason.
Right. And yeah, and we like to see savings. We like to see, I mean, even if you just go down to 1 extra stop per hour, that's still $39,000 a year. With the margins being the way they are right now, teeny tiny, that's a lot of money. To be, we'll hear a lot of times, well, but my drivers, they like to come back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, Ken and I can, and whoever else here at eTruckBiz is on here that has seen that. If you've been on our Tuesday webinars, we don't like to be the bearer of bad news, but as you get express volume, that is going to quickly dwindle away very, very, very quickly. You will probably see some driver turnover, but sometimes it is for the best for that type of situation. But again, when you bring in new people, when you increase their stops, they don't know. You bring in someone new, they don't know that the other guy could have done, a stop less an hour than them. You take that opportunity when you turn somebody over, you take that opportunity to increase that route a little bit, and try to get a little bit more out of that route. We talked about on Tuesday, and we talked about for a while, the drivers being out on road for 5 hours and coming home and being able to go home at 2 p.m. and not like come back to the terminal at 2 p.m. Go back home at 2 p.m. is much to the driver's dismay going away. But the power of X is important as a theory and as an idea, because you can, like Ken said, you can, as you start to increase the routes just a little bit, and you can do them in increments. You can say one every month, one every so many months. You can start increasing it incrementally. Drivers don't typically see that. When you make like a big change and you make like a big increase on their stops or on their routes, they're going to notice that. But as you incrementally start making those changes, incrementally, you're going to start seeing some savings. 2, you're going to start seeing that they're not really going to complain that much about a little incremental change. Same thing with keeping them out on road longer. They're out there for an extra 15, 30 minutes one day for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then you increase it again to where they have to be out for another little longer. It's not a shock to the system, okay? And now is the time to start doing that, because, like I said, when Express comes, it's going to be a quick transition, and it's going to happen real fast, and nobody wants drivers upset, right? So
yeah, the most inexpensive way to add capacity to your operation is improve stops per hour and increase hours on the road. So the minute you add a driver and a truck to your operation, you add capacity, but you've added $325 a cost for an extra dispatch. So if I can increase the rate per hour and the number of hours that are on the road, I can then not have to add that truck, or I can reduce the number of trucks that I have on the road.
And when your volume's not increasing, adding an extra truck doesn't tend to lend itself to making more money. Now, like when you start getting the express volume, Ken can talk about that too. It does increase your volume, but in some cases it increases your volume and it adds volume to the trucks that you already have that have capacity. Those trucks are already going in those areas. It's not like adding a complete new area to your current CSA. You're already servicing that area. It's just now adding capacity that you already, which is the next calculator. It's just taking up that capacity that you already have that exists within your trucks. So you know, that's a whole nother thing as far as not adding an extra truck when express comes, which we've talked about before. But if you'd like us to go over it again, we can go over that again. But these inputs, they do not auto-populate, so you'll need to put in the following values. The average driver wages a week. The average weekly payroll expense, this does include their, like, if you take your payroll completely, like taxes and everything, divide it by how many drivers you have a week, that's what you're gonna, you know, you're gonna find that. The average driver wages, that's how much you're spending on drivers, including payroll, taxes, all of it, not just their gross wages, okay? Average on duty hours, that is in our system as well. So you can go find this under the revenue here, under financials, it's in the op metrics, you can find that there. And this is also not on road hours, this is just on duty. So it includes both. Planned on daily road hours. So how many hours do you plan on having your drivers on the road? What is the new magic number, Ken, that FedEx assumes you should have your drivers out when you guys negotiate?
8.33.
Okay, so you can go in here under financials and go to op metrics, and you can figure out what you're currently averaging at to give yourself some type of goal. So in this particular instruction for this contractor, for about a week, they were averaging about 6 hours on road. So it's a little lower than 3.88. I'm sorry, 8.33. So obviously you wouldn't put the goal at 8.33. You'd probably put the goal at like maybe 7, and then move it again. Once you hit that goalpost, move that goalpost again.
Yeah, if you got two CSAs, you'd want to know what the difference is, and his two CSAs are very different here. So you'll see that one's, which is his larger CSA at 19 dispatches a day, 5.65 hours. If anything is screaming opportunity to me, this is screaming opportunity for me, because basically he would need to cut out one truck. He'd have to spread out 83 stops across 18 routes. You're only asking drivers to do 4.6 more stops per driver day. So
that's where that calculator comes into effect, is being able to, like, you can see right there why the calculator, see, like, this one is doing a lot better, 7.82.
now here, this
His
has
other contract is
no
bringing down the
opportunity.
other one.
Yeah, there's no opportunity to cut right in this one. You only got 4 dispatches a day. You'd have to spread out 133 stops across 3 people. You'd ask each driver to do 44 more stops. That's not going to happen. So,
No.
look at where you have your most stops.
Yeah, would be this one.
Yep.
Yep. And that's where you can find most of the numbers for what we were talking about in the calculator as well. So if we go back in here, that's where you would find, you know, the average stops was in there as well, current average stops per hour is in there, and then operational days. You know, some people are still doing 7 days, and some people are doing 6. So if we change that to 6, it's going to change a little bit here. Once you have the inputs put in, it does calculate out for you. So it is going to tell you, if you move this down to 1, if we're just increasing 1 extra stop an hour for all the drivers across the board, you're going to be looking at, you know, your current on-road hours. This is the power of the power of those stops per hour. So this is your stops per hour resulting from express volume increase. Okay, and then this is also going to be on-road hours with the power of stops per hour. So how many on-road hours would be required with the improved 1 extra stop per hour? Okay, it's actually less. All right, so current on-road hours is actually less. And the new number of routes, you could probably, like Ken was saying, go down about maybe 1 route. if you increased one. So that was Ken was doing some quick math there. That's what they do on the Tuesdays webinars, is they do some quick math, and everybody I'm even sitting there going, that's some quick math. You can actually see the math that Ken just did right here. If you take, like he said, if you went the other way and said, I'm going to take one route off the road, take that 80 something stops and, divide it out between everybody, you can go down one whole route, and that's what's happening here. Okay.
Yep.
Any questions about the power of X stops?
Some of the quick math is done for you. So you subtract the 423 from 459, you get that's 36 hours times 20.87, 752.04. So that, if you're paying hourly, you could save $750 in a week just by increasing this is just one stop per hour. Okay.
That's by increasing it and in turn taking one route pretty much off the road. There's that 300 and some odd change for not putting that truck out on the road and that driver. Any questions about the power of X? I think this is a theory that we've kind of talked about, well over the years, Ken, even before Express came around. Okay, just as a friendly reminder, you can unmute yourself and ask questions, or you can put it in the Q&A, you can put it in the chats. We answer all questions from all avenues, okay? The capacity calculator, this is going to be really, really beneficial when you start getting into Express volume. So this is going to calculate the impact of adding stops without adding any trucks. That was the whole thing we were talking about earlier, is not adding any extra trucks, being able to utilize that unused capacity that are in your trucks. So it's going to bring in some information, okay? But again, you have your inputs. So you have your current average on-road hours per dispatch. It's got your average stops per on-road hour, max on-road hours per dispatch, and all of this information, and it's pulling in your daily stops. And then you want to make sure that you do check to make sure that your average revenue per stop is in here. So we know that you get paid differently for different types of stop and things like that. So make sure that it is your average there. And once you put all of that in, it's going to show you. So right now, if my stops increase by nothing, this is what you're looking at, okay? If you increase it by, say, 2%, you're looking at 26 additional stops, total stops after your increase. And right now you're at 2.25 hours of unused capacity hours. So that's that time where we're talking about, FedEx assumes you should have your drivers out on the road 8.33 hours. That is unused time. So for those of you guys who pay your drivers by the day, the less you send them out with, the less money you're making on that route, okay? And then also unused capacity. So that's a lot of unused capacity. So if we increase it again, let's go up to 5%. Now we're up to, we're cutting down on those unused capacity hours, and we're cutting down on that unused capacity as far as the trucks are concerned. It's only 66 additional stops. And remember, we're not adding a truck here. We're just increasing the volume, and we're using the trucks we already have. As you start to do that, your new average on-road hours per dispatch, it starts to go up, which we like to see. We like to see that number starting to go up. That'll also help you when you go to renegotiate, as Ken can attribute to that. The higher your average on-road hour per dispatch, your on-road hour per dispatch, the more leverage you have in that negotiation, okay? So when you are running 5 hours a day on average, they're going to have a hard time having that discussion with you about needing to be paid more because you're not using your trucks as much as you should be. And if you could,
absolutely, that's
more.
true. Just did a negotiation for a guy. His on-road hours are 7.70. and he's seeing a 6% increase over his actual revenue per stop. So he got that. I've seen some come in where they're out, on road hours are about 5.5. Maybe their stops per hour are high, but we're not seeing that kind of an increase on the revenue per stop in those ones. And we're inching along here at 5%. I can tell you, when you get the express volume, and we're talking the 1030s, the noons, the 1700s, and the 8 p.m.s, that volume, it's going to make up 20 to 25% of your volume. So now, can you absorb 20%? Well, let's see what this says. Maybe not 20%, and will it be challenging for your 1030s? So you got to take a look at that. And I do have a little bit of a problem with, if you use part-timers, that's fantastic. To me, 2 part-timers at 4 hours should equal 1 dispatch. And hopefully FedEx can start to change that measurement for metals purposes as well, and kind of look at full-time equivalents. But where FedEx would struggle with the full-time equivalents, as we see, there's many drivers out there that are supposed to be full-time that work 5 hours. So, but you can see 8.82 hours on road. That's a big day. And will you have that many hours available? In an operation, can they be out there 9 hours? Do you dispatch at 8:30 and they have to be back at 6:30? Then you do have 10 hours available. So some of the return times might be 6:15, they might be 6 o'clock, just depending on your proximity to the airport. And your dispatch time will also depend on proximity to the airport as well. Sorry, Mason.
No, you're absolutely fine. And one of the things that I think the hard thing I think I have a hard time visualizing when we talk about increasing the volume but not adding a truck is how much, like, yes, we talk about the time on the road, we talk about all of that, but in the grand scheme of things, how many extra stops is that per dispatch? Because my drivers are going out right now, it's saying 100 stops per dispatch the way that things are now. If we increase it by 20%, that's only 20 extra stops. I mean, in terms of for your guys' operations that you've got going out there right now, how many of you during peak it goes up higher than that per dispatch, and your drivers are totally able to handle it? Now, do they need to go hard in the paint essentially all year round? No, but that's just 20 extra stops.
I looked at,
when you see it, when I'm a visual person, I see that it's just 20 extra stops, and I'm like, okay.
I looked at a customers today, and the best productivity numbers I've seen ever. I saw, and this was on a negotiation call today. He dispatched at 165 stops per driver day. He has one driver for the month of April that averaged 282 stops per day. I was tickled pink.
Everybody in the neighborhood's getting packages.
Yeah. I wanted to buy that guy an ice cream cone. I was that tickled. So
I'd say he needs more than an ice cream cone, Ken. That's some density. And not everybody's areas are like that, but you can see here too the current average daily revenue for this operation, what that increase would look like. And the reason the revenue increases with the stop increase, because when you don't add another truck, you're not adding that extra expense. I think that's what, I also get, like other people and myself, I get caught up with is when you add the concept of adding an extra truck, a lot of people connect back to making it so that my drivers are not overloaded and they don't get mad, right? Well, in my head, I have to connect the fact that, yes, that's helping me not have an argument with my drivers. but it's not helping me as far as money is concerned and revenue. So you send out that extra truck, that just increases the money going out instead of the money coming in. In this situation, you're increasing this percentage here, but you're increasing the money coming in and not the money going out. Okay. In this situation, this would increase weekly, and this is the amount of money yearly revenue increase. If you got this 20% and you never put another extra truck on the road for the entire year, this is how much extra revenue you would make in that year because you didn't send out an extra truck for that stop increase. Okay. Again, can you do it all the time? Can you have 20 extra stops on each of your trucks, have everybody out there for 8.5 hours? Can you do that every day of the week? Some days are going to be a little harder to do that than others, but if you can strive for that, you're looking at such a large amount of increase in profit and a large increase in revenue that can go to other things. Maybe even a little bit of your owner's benefits that I know a lot of people are wondering where that went this year. There's where it is. It's adding an extra truck. Okay. Any questions about the capacity calculator? Very quiet group today, Ken.
Hey, Mason, it's Bob.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick,
Yes, Bob.
too, I think this one here defaults to 9.25 hours on road, but I believe in the inputs, can't you change that to 8.33?
Yes, can. Yep, so you've got a little bit extra, too much capacity hours, so you could come down a little bit. And there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So if your stops increase by 10, you're down here, you're only increasing then by 10 stops for dispatch. And you got a little bit of extra capacity, and that's still a decent revenue increase. Is that what you were looking for, Bob?
Yep.
Yeah. So you can max them out. You can say, look, I don't want to go past the FedEx approved or the FedEx assumed number. You can figure out once I get past 10%, I'm pushing my limit. Okay, I'm pushing the limit for my drivers before I probably do need to put another truck on the road.
But still look at that savings. You're going to add 163,488. So if your volume increases by 10%, you don't add a driver, your revenue is going to go up by almost over $163,000, and your labor doesn't go up that much. I mean, you're only going up less than a half an hour. What? No, average increase hours. I'm sorry, an hour. So significant. A lot of that's going to drop to the bottom line because you're already burning the fuel. You've already got the maintenance. So you're going to pay the labor on that, and that's it. So basically,
Unless you're paying your guys by the day, that's for hourly people. If you're paying, which we recommend you pay hourly, but if you're paying by the day, that person's already out. You might as well put what you can on them because they're already out. You're already paying them that much. Sorry, Ken, go ahead. Any questions about the capacity calculator, Power of X calculator before we move on to the revenue per dispatch calculator? All right. Like I said, if you've got questions, please interrupt me and ask away. So the revenue per dispatch calculator, you're setting your revenue per dispatch goal. We've talked about this probably, I want to say the last 2 weeks on Tuesday's webinar, okay? We know that we want to, essentially, we've been talking about what's your average stops per dispatch goal. This is, you can connect the revenue per dispatch calculator to the same exact number, okay? So I think it was last week, we had one of our contractors that has really utilized our system really well and is doing really well this time of the year. And he knows that he has to do at minimum 100 stops average per dispatch in order to make his revenue numbers. Okay. This is a great way of going in here and figuring out what that number is for you, because not every operation is the same. As Ken just pointed out there, we've got people out there that are doing over 200 stops per driver day in some cases. Okay, so that's not everybody is going to have that gravy situation. But trying to figure out what is your golden number to get every truck to that number of stops on that truck before they leave the terminal. Okay. So again, the desired operating margin. So FedEx will negotiate your contract with the assumption that you'll achieve at least a 30% operating margin. That's like what that is their golden number for that. So this does default to 33%. Okay, so we're going to leave it there for a minute, and then we're going to go down in here to the inputs. So your average revenue per stop, we've got it defaulted here to 4. So let's just leave that there, and then we're going to mess with the total cost per dispatch. So your total cost per dispatch includes the cost of the truck, the fuel, the cost of the driver. Okay. Ken, am I missing anything else? Driver, truck, fuel. I think those are the only ones, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And in some cases, it can be higher or lower. This does default to showing 320. In some areas, you know, I mean, if you're out in California and your guys' gas is through the roof, then you would want to move this up. But in this certain situation, their particular needed average stops per dispatch to achieve 33% operating margin is 106 stops per dispatch. Okay. And if you highlight this, it says this is the root cause for contractors that struggle financially. We've talked about this so much in the last 2 weeks. I feel like I'm just, you know, having a little bit of deja vu, but this number is becoming the absolute gotta know number for your operation. Okay.
Yeah, to add to that, Mason, and
yeah,
it makes life simple for you to make on your manager. You say your manager, well, how many trucks can I dispatch? Okay, how many stops you got? 1,500. Okay, well, you know what? Your number's 106. So if I got 1,500 divided by 106, guess what? I can dispatch 14 routes. Okay, so make it easy on your manager. They got to hit that goal. It doesn't mean it doesn't change by day of the week. Mondays sometimes can be difficult. You might not be able to hit that, but guess what I have to do? I got to average 106 for the week. So if I can only hit 102 on Monday, I got 4 stops to make up on average for the rest of the week per day. Okay, make it easy. You can give individual goals by day, but once again, you got to make sure it equals that, whatever your number is, and that your BC knows it. Sorry, Mason.
and that's at a minimum. No, you're absolutely fine. So like Ken was saying, so for instance, say there's a day of the week that you know every time that you're going to be at about 100. You just know then on another day you're going to have to make up for that. Okay, doesn't mean necessarily leave it and we'll just be 106 for the rest of the week. Nope, let's increase it a little bit. That number is a great number, like Ken was saying, to have your managers live by, right? So if they know their absolute minimum is they have to at least get 106 stops on every single truck that drives out that terminal, that's a number they can live by. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't go over that number by any means. They can absolutely. That's just the minimum. That is not the maximum. All right. We have, I know some people that their BCs will be like, well, my max is one is that no, that's your minimum. That is your bare minimum that has to be able to get in the truck and drive out. Okay. And like I said, it changes from company to company. Not everybody total cost per dispatch is that low. That also is going to fluctuate a little bit. Say you say it goes up a little bit because you do pay your drivers a little bit more in order to keep up with what everybody's paying around you, okay? As you increase that, as that total cost per dispatch increases, this number of average stops per dispatch goes up. And a lot of people need to remember that when you start to give drivers bonuses, or you start to give drivers like raises, merit raises and things like that, if you start doing that across the board, you give bonuses, that bonus money has to go in here too, because the more money you give them, the more they have to produce, okay? And you can say, well, wait a minute, I don't give them a bonus all the time. If you do, factor it in, okay? Because you want to be making that money to give them a bonus before you give them the money before you have that money. Like you don't want to be giving the money out of your own pocket, okay? So as you start to increase this, say it goes up to, some people, their cost per dispatch is about $3.50 if you're going to have to keep going up, okay? Any questions about this revenue per dispatch calculator, or this needed average stops per dispatch question? Questions about that? Or would you like me to put in your total cost per dispatch so you can see what your number is? Because I can do that as well. And your average revenue per stop, because we can put those in and we can get your number right here, so you can tell your manager today. Okay. The golden rule. All right. So the golden rule is the idea that the best way to run a profitable operation is to ensure that expenditures are within the budgeted ranges. So your largest expense that you guys have, and that FedEx knows you have, is wages. Okay, those of you who are unaware, they want you to stay at or below 45% of your revenue going towards wages. In some cases, it might be way lower than that for you because, say, your drivers have a lot of window time. Okay, you may have they run a lot of miles, so you want that goal to be a little bit lower because of the time that they're behind the wheel. But
and because your revenue per stop is higher, so therefore. Yep. That is why, because if my revenue per stop's $3 and I pay $20 an hour, okay, they got to do more stops, but they got to produce that amount of revenue. Where a guy or girl driving, and only does 75 stops, your revenue per stop's probably around $6, $5 to $6 per stop. So, and both drivers are working equally as hard. They're just doing a different type of work, because driving a truck is hard, not as hard as the stops, but they are both doing work. Sorry, Mason.
Oh, you're good. Sometimes Ken, you explain it or I explain it, and we hit the same point, but sometimes you need a different explanation to get it. So I'm all for it. So this needs to be managed extremely carefully. Just as Ken and I kind of explained, depending on your situation, yes, 45% is where you should be at your max, but in some situations it can be lower. In some situations we don't necessarily want to be higher than 45%, but you got to manage it very carefully, okay? So even though there are various ways to pay your drivers, there is one rule that you have to follow, okay? The driver's wages must be no more than 45% of the revenue that they generate. This will help you calculate the minimum stops needed to realize wage budget. What that means is, what is your hourly gross wage for your employees, the revenue that you make per stop, and the planned on duty hours. This is a great way to figure out how many hours they have to drive or how many hours they have to work off what they make. Okay? There's some instructions in here. So you choose either hourly or daily pay. A lot of people will pay daily, so we'll choose daily. Choose the amount you will be paying a driver based on the pay method. So we see a range here, but we do default at 150. Let's just go up to 175 as a high number, okay? Find your average revenue per stop from the eTruckBiz $ menu item, op metrics. So your average revenue per stop, like we were talking about, it's under here. In this situation, we're gonna move it up to 4, just because I can. And if you're paying hourly, then enter the planned number of hours you plan on having your drivers on the road. So the hourly had the planned hours, okay? Additional wages, helper or trainee. You can say yes if they're a helper or trainee. You can say that they're hourly or daily, and you can say helper, hourly, hour, gross wage, planned helper hours. This is also going to help you adjust for those helpers. So you're going to be able to see, look, with my driver, if you put a helper or a trainee on the truck with a driver, you have to also, the stops need to increase to pay for that, okay? We see a lot of people that will send out a helper or send out a trainee on a truck. When you have 2 bodies on that truck, you're paying for both of those bodies. They have to generate enough revenue to cover both, okay? And that's something we see a lot of times. People are not increasing the stops on that truck when they do something like that, and that dramatically lowers the amount of revenue that's coming off of that truck or coming into that truck, okay? So we see a lot of helpers during peak for various reasons. Just go ahead and make sure you put that in here, because as you saw, if we take the helper off just with one person with this information in here, you got to have them, and you can do it for each driver too. So each driver might have a needed dispatch for each driver. Some drivers are maybe paid at $175, some are paid at $150. That does change the dynamic there, okay? This is, if the driver's making $175 a day and you're making $4 a stop, you got to at least send them out with 97 stops, okay? If you start putting the helper on there and you pay that helper $15 an hour, and that helper, you plan on having that helper out with them for 7 hours, it now goes up to 156. That is a large increase, but that is to cover for these additional wages, okay? That is to keep the wages for that particular vehicle and for that particular day under 45%.
Can I ask a question here to everybody out there?
Yeah.
Is there anybody here who does utilize helpers during peak season?
You can either say yes in the chat or raise your hand as you're saying, like, yes, I do.
If you do, like I said, this is a great tool because helpers are beneficial. There's a reason UPS utilizes helpers during peak, and they actually keep them on those trucks through like January 16th. And that's something that's agreed to with the Teamsters contract. So, but you got to get the work out of them. The one thing I would suggest is that you hire helpers that live on the route, so they don't come into the terminal, so they're not getting paid for windshield time, and they have to have a way to clock in and clock out. Oh yeah, eTruckBiz. The P&D driver app also works for P&D helpers. So I wouldn't, I definitely think they have a use, but you got to load them up. You got to, and this tool will tell you how to use them. How much has to be on that truck to make it worthwhile? And as I said, hire the helpers that are on the route, so they're not driving back and forth with the driver sitting on their butt to and from the terminal. Thanks.
Yep. It's a great way to utilize the helper, but without paying them for unused time and unused capacity. Okay. Any questions about the golden rule calculator, any of these 4 calculators? Or to be honest with you, if you have a question about another part of the software that you would like answered, now is your time to ask it, because we are here and able to answer almost all questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll find out for you though. Any questions at all? Quiet group today.
Yeah, I think you've hit everything today.
Okay.
If, like I said, if you have questions when you're utilizing these, pick up the phone and call, but they're there just to help guide you with some basics in your operation.
I have one question. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Elaine.
No, you're fine.
Okay, so with the calculator, when you're paying them by the stop, how do we work that?
I thought, is there a way to, no, so you would have to figure out what they're making on a per day basis. Say they average $1.25 a stop, and normally they do 180 stops.
Mm-hmm.
That's $225 a day.
Oh, so put that number in then, or divide that by how many hours that they worked, and then put
You
that
could do the
number in?
daily wage. So the daily wage works there.
Okay.
And if you pay them $1.50 times that 150, now they're up to 225 per day.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep. All right.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep, you would just make it so that they have a daily wage and put that in there, and then make sure that you're putting in your revenue per stop, because and that does put paying by the stop in perspective as well. Did we know that we were paying them maybe $225 a day? You know,
Right.
Until you put it in that perspective, then it's a little different.
Yes.
And that runs into, okay, not stops needed for profitability. If they do 183 stops, and you pay them $125 per stop, you're right there at 228 or so. So you definitely want to make sure that you're figuring that out, so that way they're not going out with too little stops and then not making enough on the truck for you.
And you can also see if it's worthwhile to do. This guy who's averaged 282 stops per day, I just did some math. Say he's getting $1.25 a stop. That's $352 a day. And so he's doing some stops, but how much revenue is he generating? 282, just for we'll say he's generating $3.75 per stop. That driver's generating $1,057 worth of revenue. So you can see that driver is well below the 45% mark. Okay. So math doesn't lie. It's how you have to run your business. I always say you have to have a cold-blooded engineer, and you have to have a cold-blooded accountant. And then you as owners and your BCs kind of mix in the humans there, because that does play into effect. But utilize cold-blooded engineering and then mix it with some reality.
Any other questions? Excellent question, Alina. Thank you for asking. I always forget. Every now and then, you have to remind me that you guys pay by the stop, and then I'm like, okay, I gotta adjust for how would you use something if you're paying by the stop.
Right.
Keep me on my toes.
And Jeff doesn't agree, and that if it's saving you dispatches and it still makes financial sense, great, but make sure it makes financial sense at all times, okay? Because their rate still, you don't want it to exceed that 45%, because then all of a sudden that's coming out of your owner's benefit.
And that 45% is including the taxes?
Payroll. Yes, it includes the payroll taxes.
Payroll taxes and like unemployment taxes?
Yes, anything that unemployment taxes, payroll taxes are all included in your wages as direct labor wages.
Okay.
It's not just their gross wages.
Yeah.
If we don't include the payroll wages, the payroll part of it, then your 45% all of a sudden becomes, 50 something percent because
Normally about 6, so you're staring
if you
at
get
50. And that 6% then would come off of the 12% that FedEx has budgeted for owner benefit. So now all of a sudden you got a 6% operating margin, and you're in the danger zone there.
Right, okay. Yeah, I can't wait till I put all my numbers in, like even going back, so I can see where I was and what percentage I'm at.
So
yes. Make sure you're sitting down when you do it. I've heard
Yeah.
a lot of people get in here and they start putting in their numbers and they start going, wait a minute. Wait.
get woozy, blood pressure drops. So
Mhm.
Yeah, I would suggest, sitting there in the afternoon with a drink because it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and take it all in slowly.
I switched to ice cream cones. So
Oh, Ken, look at you getting better. That's not true. I heard you talking about some alcohol beverage this morning on our morning call, but it is Friday. I get it.
all righty.
All right. If anybody has no other questions or anything like that, it is Thursday, isn't it? It's not Friday. I'm just wishful thinking. If nobody has any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions you may have. And if I don't talk to you before next week, have a great rest of your day and an awesome weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, you too. Bye.